On June 28, 2009, the world-renowned physicist Stephen Hawking hosted a huge party, and no one showed up. And I mean absolutely no one. There were tons of hors d'oeuvres, champagne, balloons. No expense was spared. Poor little Stephen sat there for hours, and not a single soul walked through the door. But this wasn't a failed party. It was an experiment. The reason no one showed up was because he didn't tell anyone. He only gave out the invitations with the date and time and GPS coordinates after the party was over. You see, the only people that could have actually attended this shindig would be time travelers coming from the future. They would be the only people who would know when and where it was. So either there's no such thing as time travel, or no one from the future wanted to come to poor little Stephen's party. Ooh, that stings, don't it? Okay. Welcome to another episode of Random ROKKIT Rants. It's a series where I rant and ramble about random topics and try to tie them all together before I finish my ride through downtown. And as I alluded to in the opener, we're going to talk about time travel. Like most people, I've always wanted to travel through time. I mean, who hasn't wanted to take something back that they regret? Maybe right a past wrong that hurt someone, or maybe just see if we ever get to have flying cars. Personally, I'd love to imagine visiting the past. Maybe being able to walk through the streets of Egypt, or see what a dinosaur really looked like. My favorite movie when I was a kid was Back to the Future with Michael J. Fox. My mom always said that I reminded her of him, which was cool until I saw the scene where Marty's mom was putting moves on her future son. Yeah, thanks for the nightmares, Mom. But even as a kid, I would get twisted in knots trying to resolve all those paradoxes within the movie. As an adult, I've come to find even more holes in the general concept of time travel, and since I'm on a bike that's moving, let's talk about a specific one that I've only recently come to realize. When it comes to time travel, you can't just move through time. You also have to move through space. While this may be difficult to explain while I'm riding, I'll give it my best. Most of us tend to think of space as relatively static. We think of the sun as stationary and we're just moving around it, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Here's the deal. Everything in space is moving. Let's start with what I'm doing right now. I'm moving pretty slowly at the moment, but for argument's sake, let's say I'm moving at 50 kilometers an hour across the surface of the Earth. And for my American friends, that's 31 miles an hour. Also, as a side note, I may be off a touch with some of the conversions between metric and imperial, but I'm doing this while riding, so just give me a little slack there. Anyway, we all know that the Earth is spinning. Well, at least we should know that. It's spinning just a little faster than my bike is moving right now at 1,600 kilometers an hour, or about 994 miles an hour. And of course, the Earth isn't just spinning in place, it's moving around the sun at 110,000 kilometers an hour. That's 68,350 miles an hour if I recall. And while it's technically moving around the sun in a circular orbit, if you put a gigantic streamer on the end of the Earth as it went around the sun, you'd notice that it would actually make a spiral out of the streamer. Why? Because the sun is moving too. It's moving around the Milky Way galaxy at 828,000 kilometers an hour, which is around 515,500 miles an hour, give or take. And of course, that means the Earth and all of the other planets within the sun's orbit are along for the ride. So basically, when we think we're standing still, we are flying. Last but definitely not least, at last count, there are approximately 2 trillion galaxies. That's 2 trillion with a T, each with an average of, say, 100 billion stars. So that's 100 billion suns each, and literally countless planets inside of each of those 2 trillion galaxies. That little fact has absolutely nothing to do with what I'm talking about right now, but it's just amazing. Anyways, I did warn you that this was a rant. So, each one of these galaxies are also moving. That includes us. Our Milky Way galaxy is estimated to be moving at approximately 2.1 million kilometers an hour. That's around 1.3 million miles an hour. What's crazy is scientists have evidence that all the galaxies, including us, are actually speeding up as time goes on. So that's where the concept of dark matter comes up, and that's another rant for another day. Now, I spend every single day using my brain to visualize things for a living. That particular muscle of mine, just from tons of use is very, very strong. And even I have no way of being able to truly picture all of this at once. It's just too big, too fast, and way too complicated. The best way I can think of to describe all of this movement is like this. Let's imagine that right now, as I'm riding, I'm a tiny bacterium racing along the back of a flea. And that flea is running across the nose of a dog, which is sticking its head out of a car, that's ripping around the deck of an aircraft carrier that's churning through the Pacific Ocean. Now, as a bacterium, I can't even fathom anything past the dog, and even that's a stretch. So, how does this all tie into time travel? Well, as I mentioned, there are many issues when it comes to time travel, but if you had a time machine, it better not just move through time. Just like us, it must also move through space. In other words, if I'm a bacterium racing along that flea's back, if I separate myself from time and move either forward or backward, I would need to know where the flea would be so that when I arrived in the time I wanted, I would also arrive in the place I wanted. Even if I only moved 1 second forward or backward and didn't account for all the things that are moving beneath me, I would be nowhere near my original starting point. Not only would I not be on the flea's back anymore, I wouldn't even be on the dog or even be in the car. They would have either moved too far away if I went into the future, or wouldn't be there yet if I went into the past. And that's only 1 second divorced from time and space. And when you remember the immense speeds I mentioned just a few seconds ago, a time traveler wouldn't even be in the same solar system if they went backward or forward a day or two, let alone a few decades or centuries. As Einstein described as part of his theory of relativity, time and space are linked. Now, he was speaking about moving through space and not about time travel, but the theory applies because we actually have to keep up with everything that moves around us, let alone go ahead of it to meet it at its future trajectory. Time would be very hard to measure within the machine as well, assuming there's a continuity there. Because as everything speeds up, time slows down. So for something a little bit more down to earth, satellites in orbit have to contend with this concept in the form of GPS on our phones. They would be out of whack within a day or two if we didn't factor this in. Now, I'm grossly oversimplifying here for brevity, but for GPS to work, clocks in the satellite as well as on Earth have to be perfectly synced. If they're not, your phone would tell you that you're driving through a mall instead of on a freeway. And here's a little life hack for you. If the freeway you're on has lots of stores and screaming people running in all directions, that's not a freeway. That's a mall. Since satellites are further out and therefore have to travel farther and therefore faster to keep pace with our rotation, their clocks end up being just a few microseconds slower at the end of each day. Just this little difference is enough to screw the whole system up. So to counter this, satellites have to account for the slower pace of time relative to your phone on Earth, so that everything is synced. When considering this fact, trying to get our time machine to move through time and space is just too crazy. So what if our time machine instead was able to teleport itself, like the way they do with people in Star Trek? That would be slightly easier in terms of getting around the whole moving part, except of course, teleportation is even more impossible than time travel.
Scotty, what's the matter? We can't make transporter contact, sir. The entire system's inhibited.
So that's out as well. In the end, we're left with only the present. We're forced to appreciate what little time we're given while flying through space on this blue spaceship called Earth. We can't rewind and try again, so it's important we strive to live a life with as little regrets as possible. If you love someone, today's the day. Tell them while you still can. If you've always dreamt of starting your own business, do it right this minute. And of course, if you feel like going for a ride, don't put it off for another second. If you like this Random Rocket Rant, or have anything to contribute on the subject, please feel free to add to the conversation below. I don't pretend to be anything close to a scientist, let alone Stephen Hawking. So if I got anything wrong, let me know in the comments. Just try to be nice. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you're new. Your help truly makes a difference to this channel. As I mentioned in episode 1 of this particular series, there are tons of different types of videos in the works. Tutorials, short films, serious stuff, stupid stuff, and so on. So if this video isn't your style, I'm sure you'll enjoy at least one of the videos I have coming out soon. And until then, I'll see you out there.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.